It's my great pleasure to have Lynette Favell with me today. And Lynette is a widely trained practitioner of all kinds of things, and she's going to talk a little bit about all of that. She began her career of working with people with health as a registered nurse, and she was just telling me off camera that she was specialising in cardio thoracic work, which is extremely intensive medical work, obviously. Lynette, how I came to know her in recent years is that Lynette was one of the very original founding people in Bodytalk in Australia. So the founder of Bodytalk, John Valentine, wasn't too far geographically distanced from where Lynette was, and she was able to study with him, and has gone on to become a teacher of Bodytalk, and has had a very, very wide experienced practice with Bodytalk and other modalities. So Lynette, I wonder if you could introduce yourself, and we're going to talk today about the issues surrounding aged care, and particularly the community aspects of it, and the psychiatric or psychological issues that are occurring for people in aged care, and perhaps tell us a little bit about what led you into focusing in this line of work. So Lynette, welcome.
Thank you, Neil. It's absolutely really exciting to be here today, to have this opportunity to share with the community about aged care and how I got here, and where I really would like to see things moving in the future. And I have a lot of hopes and dreams for our elderly. I tend to call it elder care rather than aged care.
Fair enough. Yeah.
It's better for me. And it's taking us out of that traditional paradigm a little bit, because I feel that's the way we need to move. Why I've been drawn so strongly into this area at the moment is, in the beginning, in my early days of nursing, I actually loved palliative care, but I was like 19, and I felt like I could feel that it was an area that maybe I just felt personally I might not last a long time, because I'm very compassionate, empathetic, passionate, and I just felt I needed to go and get some life experience before I did work like that. Because obviously it's intense, you're, dealing with end of life constantly, and, grief and sadness and sometimes joy, as, it doesn't always have to be, those types of aspects when people do die and leave us. So I decided to study cardiothoracics because I just had a passionate team where I was working. I got to work with Victor Chang, who was just the most amazing, beautiful man. And although he was a brilliant cardiac surgeon, what I loved about him was he had this incredible compassion, and I really resonated with that. He respected every person, all team members, and I think in lots of ways he really showed me a lot about what, being able to do something really well, but do it in a way that embraced everybody. And, I'm truly so grateful that I had that experience of working with Victor Chang. And I came to Queensland, and worked in cardiothoracics for quite a few years. I then had twin girls, and I decided that full-time work was not for me, and I started to make different pathways. And in that pathway, I realised that my health was not great. I wanted to feel better in myself as a mother of twin girls. And so, yeah, I met this crazy osteopath called Tracy Livingston, and I say that with absolute love. And she knew John Beltime, and Tracy liked to help people feel better quickly, and it wasn't quite working in her model. So she introduced me to John, and that was the start of my body talk journey, because although I didn't initially get any response, I could feel something was changing inside of me, and I just totally made sense that we were going to ask my body what the priorities were. So here I was, a beautifully Western trained nurse who, thought Western medicine was amazing, and it is, and it has its place and will always have its place. If you're in a trauma, you probably would prefer an emergency practitioner as well as a body talker to be there. But yeah, there's definitely a place, and I have no regrets about my nursing years. I didn't leave nursing because I was unhappy or anything. I just met something that really just struck a chord and was pulling me away. I also knew as a nurse I could work forever. I would always have work. I would always be, reasonably well paid because of shift penalties. So I had to make the decision to make a complete break, feel the fear, do it anyway, be uncomfortable, do it anyway. So I did some facilitating for uni students, undergraduate students, saved up my money and just cut ties and went into practice as a body talk practitioner. And the biggest lesson I learned there in the first couple of months was rebook your clients, because I would say, okay, well, let me know if you want to come back. And they go, oh, can I book now? I'm like, oh, okay. And that's been my work for many, many years. And I went on and trained as an instructor, and I love body talk. It continues to fascinate me on a daily basis. I still get excited when I do sessions, and you just put it all together or not and see the outcomes. And then a few years ago, I had my own really strong health challenges where, I felt I really did have a choice whether I wanted to stay or leave. And I did that all intuitively on my intuitive pathway, and certainly learned a lot about trust, about, how your body does know what it needs. And after that long period, which was quite a very internal time, quite an isolated time, I basically was alone most of the time. I just had a drawing to go back out into the community. So I decided I'd go back into aged care, and I specifically wanted to work with people with dementia because I felt that was an area that I could connect with them, because all the years of self-learning and unlearning, I feel I have the capacity to connect at the heart, and that's how you communicate with people with dementia, because the brain is not articulating what they want to say, but at a level they still know exactly what they want. So that's what I did. I went back in and I just do a few short shifts a week, and I love it. But I saw lots of concerns. So it took me a couple of years, but I'm very aware that I'm probably there for advocacy for these people. Also by leading by example, by showing others how to connect and how to care. I've also used some of my body talk in there just to assist residents with basic care, and had great success. So it's very exciting. I love it. I'm very passionate, but we need to look at what we're doing in our facility care.
Absolutely. Look, I don't want to lose the thread of where you are at the moment, but working with the elderly, and particularly working with dementia, And what you're saying is that the communication has to come from the heart. So it has to come from another mind. It's a different mind to the intellect, which is no longer functioning correctly. And tell me about heart communication. So when you're going to communicate with, somebody who's in your care there, what is the process? What does it feel like? How does it operate? How are they responding? Talk people through this, because I don't think this is very well understood at all.
Yeah, I think the first thing is connection. You have to connect to them in some way. So if it's not going to be through this brain, it has to be through the heart. So you have to center yourself in the heart. And one of the first things is it's okay how long it takes. So we can be very busy, but when you come to the resident, you have to stop and you have to center yourself in the heart, because there's a lot of crazy stuff going on constantly through a shift. And people on dementia work don't realize that, you can't just switch off to what's happening there, because that could end up in someone being on the floor or hurt. And so you have to just be able to come back and just center very quietly in your heart and spend time just sitting with them in their energy. So if they're agitated, just your presence in the room and just being, doing nothing, just staying present to them. And just, it, for me, I think I presented, it comes across as a calmness, but it's also I see you. So, and I'm a very auditory person on a subtle level. So I often hear what needs to be done as I come into that center. So
what you're doing is you're making contact with them and forming a connection, and you're definitely formulating the beginnings of communication by hearing. So you're not exactly a vacuum, but you're available. I'm here, I'm listening.
Yeah.
And then the messages are beginning to flow.
Yeah, that's exactly it for me. And you're engaging with your subtle senses. You're observing. There's practical steps that come in, but on the whole, it's really about seeing where they're at, understanding, is this person at the moment in fear? Is this person in anger? Are they in grief? We see all sorts of, they love the word behaviours, which is just an interesting way of saying when they can't express themselves. So what is going on here for this person? And it sounds really crazy, but what brings joy to my heart is when I can successfully toilet a resident that nobody else can toilet. Mm-hmm. And it's their dignity, and to see that we can see that they still have all these pathways, and it's how you approach and how you listen to the cues, watch the cues. And that's the difference between being able to give supportive, productive and loving care versus two people approaching someone to get a task done.
Yeah.
So we see a lot of task orientation, and it's simply listening, looking, watching, observing, timing.
Okay, so what you're talking about there is that if they can get some of these behaviours,
yes, I always want to start a behaviour chart for staff.
I love it. That's just so.
I just want behaviours for all the staff, because I see all the behaviours that the residents are doing in each and every one of us.
Absolutely. So anyway, when you're able to allow for the behaviours to occur, then there's a relaxation, and the body is able to, this mental processing from the rest of the body is able to actually get into place, to the extent that somebody who's unable to toilet themselves is able to do it. So that's an amazing outcome of such meaning to that resident, for that individual, to be able to do something as simple as that. And Yeah, that's incredible. This idea that just by listening, by being an absorbing quality, that would make such a difference. Tell me, is there an opportunity in the training of staff or the selection of staff, or what do you do to try and get more of this kind of behaviour actually into the staffing matrix?
Is a very, very huge challenge because most of our staff are coming in maybe all with the minimal training of a Cert 3, but a lot of them are there for the job. A lot of people won't work in dementia because, you are under threat repeatedly. There is danger involved. However, once again, if you can read and, you know when to withdraw, simple things like body position. And I don't know, I worked in prison units in the Brisbane hospitals for a few months at one stage, so I probably observed and learnt a lot there. But yeah, often, and most people most people that get hurt is probably from their own body position and approach. Yeah. So the staff that come into dementia, some see it as like it's easier because the residents, well, they can't go and say this person didn't do this for me. So, and then there's other people who are there because they love it. They love working with the people. And yeah, you really need a team that has different probably areas of expertise, different approaches. We need male carers, we need female carers, we need, that mixture. And I've noticed in the time that I've been working, there's been changes and there's been good positive changes. But it doesn't take much to disrupt a group of residents with dementia, because I can come back after, we can come on for a shift in the afternoon and there've been all new staff in the morning just because of sick leave and that. So we have minimal staffing anyway. So if you only have three staff members and you're caring for a whole unit of people, one person out for the day creates big change. So as a team, the shift that I work, sometimes when we know that we're not going to be able to come to work because of something that is going to be happening for us, we actually organise with each other to cover the shifts, because we know then as a team we're stronger. And it's not just about caring for the residents, it's also about caring for each other, because, it's hard work on all levels. And yeah, we need to support each other in our self-care.
Yeah. So you obviously, without necessarily it being a structural thing from the outside, like from the senior management, you're creating a community amongst the staffing to interact with a community of the elderly that you've got there with you. Talk a little bit about the actual community within the facility. So what's happening between the residents, what's happening, like that kind of community stuff, because once again in dementia care it's a whole different world. I have been into a few dementia wards and I know it's different.
Yeah, we amongst our residents, so once again there's a lot of transition and change. And when I first began in the dementia unit, we had like a very content and happy community in our little unit, and you could do things like put a big hat on and they would laugh at you all day, put a great big straw hat on and they'd look at you and point and laugh, and they would all communicate in their own little way. And there was familiarity, there was, they knew each other. They might not know each other's names, but, they would nod good morning at breakfast and things. Over the years, it changes depending on which residents we have in. And over the last period of time, we've had quite a lot of aggression in our, it's not just male and female. The only difference is the females are not as strong. And are very are very slim and thin. So, but we have regular episodes of aggression where we have to protect the unable to protect self residents and also move other residents away as much as possible. We have a lovely, beautiful outside area, so it's good to hook up with one and move them out when things are hotting up a bit. And I mean, always the aim is to diffuse and, you know, move away and allow the person that is the aggressor to have that space they need, and to find out, is there something that they need? Are they expressing a need? And I think one of the problems is that we do see like a bit of psychogeriatric in dementia, and we don't get a lot of information about residents before they come in. So, you know, we get just like a GP summary, and we don't often know about aggressive behaviour until they've arrived. Often then information is disclosed, but they've already been accepted. So yeah, it's it can be very challenging. I've been assaulted once. However, gratefully for my other senses, I was warned 2 weeks before I kept getting that. It was just simple. I was just intuitively getting, there's a critical incident, you need to act immediately. And I figured that if I was getting the information, it was probably going to happen while I was there. So I had a good team at the time that we worked together, and I said, you know, just letting you know. And they understood me. All the work staff I work with directly understand my other work, and they don't necessarily, some of them think it's a bit weird and a little bit off the dial, but that's okay. I can accept that. They don't have to do anything with that information, but they've seen lots of scenarios where I've used either some Bodytalk or some, you know, insight that has played out, and they're like, okay, you knew that. So when this did happen, my first thing was dial 000, call police. And that was the correct thing to do, because 22 minutes later, we were all still trying to defend and protect. So, it's real.
Yeah, like it's extremely real, Lynette, what you're talking about, and like amazingly potent, that type of experience. And, you know, like we both know from clinical work with so-called non-dementia patients, you know, the everyday ones who sort of get about life, they are subclinical. Almost everybody walking around the planet is subclinical psychiatric, you know,
or cognition impairment
in some way or another. And but when you don't actually suffer from something like dementia, you don't have, or you have more strategies to actually mask and hide all of this stuff. So, you know, that aggression that comes out as a physical episode like the one that you're talking about there now, in the wider community may or may not come out. So like it might come out where it's hidden, where they think they can actually hide it. So they might, you know, be you know, somebody who's going to cause grief with domestic violence or something along those lines, or not. It might be just that they're cruel. They're cruel with their interactions with their family members or their work associates or whatever else. So what you're seeing in dementia is this unmasking. There's an unmasking of the, you know, the inner suffering and the inner pain. And in a way, you know, like it's a gift, because all of that, you know, disguise is taken away. So dementia could be seen as a gift in that way. But of course, the strategies that, you know, you're able to apply, or the people walking up and down the street here in my community are able to apply, also come with many other skills. And, you know, like it's a mixed bag, isn't it? It's
yeah, and they are in a lock-up unit, so they are not free to go and do, you know, if they we have you know, you can have somebody who actually thinks that they're on a boat, and, you know, they're looking for something because there's, you know, mechanical problems on the boat, and, you know, how do you work with that? So, you know, this gentleman, I get clarity, where are you today? Like, because sometimes he's on a train, And, you know, he'll tell me he's on the boat, and I'll explain to him the boat stopped. And he's like, oh, okay. So, you know, all the engine stuff becomes less of a priority. And, you know, so often, you know, we just, you have to be able to pick up where they're at. A lot of people many years ago were taught, you know, you have to teach them, you know, orientate them. No point in orientating them. What you have to do is connect where they're at, and then make that as practical as they can understand to the current environment for them. So they can relax and go, oh, okay. So he'll say, oh, we're docked. Okay. So yeah, you know, the engines are just off at the moment. And, you know, would you like a cup of tea? And I can divert him off to do that. And then it gives him a chance to reorientate. And next thing, he'll be out walking in the garden. So, but you can't ignore them. You have to engage. And that can be very repetitious. And that's where you have to have that capacity to remain patient, remain present, remain centered, and listen to them, because they will give you the cues if you can hear. And if you can settle them on a particular like theme, we communicate that to each other so that everybody then stays on that theme.
Okay.
Because the other side of it is there's always the aggression, but the other tremendously sad thing that we watch is the grief. So when somebody's looking for their husband or wife who passed away many years ago, or they're very concerned about the children. Where are the children? Who's looking after the children? And they know it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon because they innately know that. And, you know, so what do? They're in true distress because it's reality to them at that moment. You can't just go, oh, look, you're 85 and, you know, your kids are now in their 40s, 50s, and you've got 6 grandchildren. That's not going to reassure them.
Okay. So you really have to actually connect with them from your heart around it's okay that the children are making their way home from school, and it's interesting, isn't it? So like you're satisfying like a faulty intellectual process, but you're satisfying it through some certainty in the heart.
Yeah.
That's the bedrock for them. Can I ask a really strange question, and that is, do you ever observe that somebody becomes, we'll use dementia-like within their heart mind? Is there an expression of a dementia-like condition in the heart mind?
I think probably sometimes in the scenarios of extreme grief, perhaps that is what we're seeing. Okay. Probably, I know that I understand, you know, like they always diagnose dementia in this brain, but we know we have other brains. So I would say probably when I have seen some residents that have extreme grief, and I think that is probably more heart brain.
Yeah. So, you know, if I may, when you're talking to the gentleman who is wanting to fix up the motors in the boat, it may well be that the part that's coherent is actually another brain inside his body, not necessarily even his heart that's actually coherent at that point. It's that practical thing that wants to get his spanners out and, you know, do something about fixing the motors because there's a problem. You know, there's a problem there. The problem could well be grief or whatever it is that's occurring in this thoracic mind, or, you know, the brain there. And of course, the upstairs is not working much at all. So, you know, we understand there is a transition and that like there's a difference there. And I'm very interested in your answer there because in my own clinical practice, I've been looking at these psychoses or, you know, psychological issues for these other minds. And, you know, I'm almost at the point where I'm ready to actually write on this topic. You know, fundamentally, it's the psychiatric issues of the other minds. Anyway, I wonder if you could talk a little bit for us now around, you know, where you see things going in terms of, you age or elder care, as you call it, and particularly with what's going on with the government restrictions and the changes that are going on at the moment, and just where you see it heading, and is there a way to maintain support for the elders?
I think one of the first things I'd like to say is probably my biggest concern with elder care in facilities is the medicalisation of their care, and so that's one very high structure that I feel is very overriding in the way that we provide care for these people. And then, of course, especially in the last it's always been a topic, this funding and staffing in aged care. And we have just had a Royal Commission, which is still in process and probably will continue for a while now because of all the COVID stuff that's happened, because that certainly has stepped in very quickly as far as, restricting visitations and access to children and what have you. And I'm very, very grateful. I work in a facility where we have not done any complete lockdown, but we still have to follow government regulations to the T. And so that is having an impact on our residents. And although things have been put in place, like, being able to do phone calls and I believe some video calls and stuff as well, it's still, in dementia care especially, these residents can't pick up the phone and dial a number. So I've actually started to see, probably in the last month especially, I see changes in behaviour. I see longing, I see yearning, and I know what that person's yearning for. And we have to remember that just because they have dementia doesn't mean that they can lay down pathways. There's no doubt about that. I have residents that recognise me immediately when I enter that unit, and they know who's there, what they do, what they will do. And also they know when they go out for lunch every Saturday and it's now Sunday and their family member hasn't come in. Why? What's happened to him? I don't see so-and-so anymore. He doesn't come anymore. And, they can run that for 6-7 hours, that concern. And you can divert, distract, ensure they get a full belly, which also is sometimes very challenging because we don't always have suitable food for each person. And I will go as far as I'm working as a carer, not as a registered nurse. So, asking the registered nurse, can we please phone? And, you're told, oh, it's a bit late or we don't want to do that. And I say, well, we do. And, the absolute love on the other end of the phone is just incredible, and the gratefulness that we called. So I feel like we are in limitation because we do not have consistency of staff coming through who understand these residents and these families. And so I don't think we're meeting their needs of this isolation. So they're still allowed one visitor. There are special considerations where other people are allowed to visit outside of time, only one, of course. And if there's, behaviours or trauma or whatever. If someone has a bad fall, of course, we will allow the family in. And end of life, they are allowed to have a couple of visitors just in the room. But other facilities in Australia have done a complete lockdown and have been in a complete lockdown since probably March, where they're temperature checking and only allowing staff in, and then the doors are locked. So, and it just brings up that whole thing of connection and touch. So we have to social distance in the workplace, but obviously there are exceptions there because of the fact that if you're giving care to someone on a bed, we're going to be a bit closer. But even to that point of, where you just want to hug somebody, it's like, oh, I'm still hugging. Because if a resident puts their arms out, I'm not going to deny that.
No.
So, but, you know, it's just, it is very difficult. And my concerns, you know, for the future are, you know, if this is going to continue on, are we going to go to a window where we can go back to normal? I would hate to think that children will not be allowed to visit for, you know, a longer period of time. I had someone say to me the other day, oh, but children in dementia? And I went, yes, children visit in dementia. Like we have residents, I've got photos all over their room where they're with their grandchildren in our facility. And they miss those grandchildren. Those children bring so much love and energy in. And if you look at aged care across the world, there's been so much growth in bringing children into aged care facilities and of running playgroups with residents, both, you know, residents with and without dementia. And all we heard about was the benefits, the benefits, the benefits. That's just all stopped. And
that's amazing. I wonder about the benefits to the children as well. So, you know, like in my generation when I was growing up as a kid, you know, there were all these very elderly people right up until death were, you know, around us, very closely around us. And, you know, pretty difficult psychological conditions, you know, as well for the elderly and amongst it. I'm not trying to make out that they were all easy ones, they weren't. But the growth that came for the children was extraordinary.
yeah.
So, like, there's just an acknowledgement of diversity for a start, you know, that there is this diversity of expression. And there would also be an acknowledgement of, you know, these deep feelings and the role of masks. So even as a child and amongst all of that stuff, I was recognizing that there were masks that, you know, adults were applying to, you know, to actually get by, to get past their traumas, past their griefs, past, you know, their angers and all that. And, you know, to see these elderly folk who weren't so equipped and how they were behaving, it was wonderful as a kid to actually be able to see that and to go, aha, you know, like that's a real thing. And it concerns me what you're talking about, that's going on all around the world, you know, the separation of children, because the kids just aren't going to learn. They're not going to have that opportunity to learn about it. Where does that take us in 50, 60, 70 years, you know?
Yeah, and I think the saddest part is that one of the understandings that we have about elder care and as staff and as our you know, missions and, you know, what we do, what we strive for is all around that person-centered care. And it's that this is their home and that we're guests to their home. So I question, who are we to control their home? Like there's practical steps, and I'm totally aware of that. But, you know, we're at a point now where in Australia we have minimal COVID. Why are we still going to withhold all of this? We don't see an end in sight for these restrictions. And that also then the other thing I'm really passionate about is people understanding that when you have a family member enters the facility, you actually need to be very knowledgeable on what you want and how you want your loved one cared for, because otherwise you actually will not know what's happening for them. You do need to be present. You need to ask questions. You need to resource good information, because a lot of people don't even understand that when you go into aged care, like you have a GP, but it's just like at home. If you want to see the GP, you have to make contact. Some GPs come every week, some don't. So, and it's not as easy as that, you know, the only way you can get urgent care is via ambulance and that. But I think a lot of people don't understand that unless they advocate for their loved one, a lot of things can just slide by. Because we just don't have a consistency of, you know, some facilities may have a GP attached, but many facilities you have your GP and yeah, the GP comes, maybe they'll get a fax to say something needs looking at, but it might be 3 days later. So, you know, and certainly being very clear on when that person that's in our care is approaching end of life, what your wishes are. In dementia, it's great if a conversation is had early so that the person can actually advocate for themselves. But if not, you know, it's going to be their medical power of attorney that needs to speak up. And like I said, the staff changeover can be rapid. So people do not understand, you know, where somebody is at on this week, and 2 weeks later, I look at them and I'm like, wow, there's been a considerable decline. What's happening? And, you know, there's just sort of no awareness of what is happening.
Yeah.
And people talk about dying because, you know, it's become a taboo, but that's unwound. But yeah, how did this person want to die? There's so many things in dementia. Do people want to be force-fed, or do they want to, you know, when they no longer want to eat or can no longer feed themselves, do they want to continue on being fed? There's so many things that, you know, really we need to educate and help people to understand. I see people that, you know, don't even understand that dementia is a terminal disease and is a palliative disease. So if you have dementia and you have cancer, you will get a lot more support than if you just have dementia.
Okay.
Because people go cancer.
So it's not recognized.
Awareness.
Yeah. Sorry, Lynette. So it's not recognised, generally speaking, as a disease in its own right, which can lead to death. So it's not picked up.
I think no. I think we don't talk it.
Okay. All right. So it's a taboo. Another one of the taboos in the industry. Yeah. So look, you're talking a lot around the topic of advocacy here. And, you know, people watching this, you know, generally the demographic of people are that they're likely to have parents or at least elderly relatives who are in this age group that we're talking about. And you mentioned about advocacy. So, you know, particularly this topic of how I want to die. You know, and like that really strikes me when you talk about that. And I know when in an earlier conversation I shared with you my mother's wishes, which none of us children had the courage to actually see through. And she had a very harsh view of what she wanted to have happen when, you know, in the event of dementia. But you know, which would have been criminal, to be honest. But all the same, that was her wish. You know, like her wish was that she did not want to be going through that experience, you know, for years and years and years. But somewhere in there needs to be this advocacy. There has to be a recognition of the wishes of the individual. What would your guidance to people be around extracting that and becoming very clear about it early on in life? So, say, you know, me, I'm 60 years old and I'm you know, I've got my marbles, I think, most of them anyway.
The most important ones.
And but, you know, should I be doing something now? So should I actually be telling people around me about these things?
Absolutely. It's never too early to start having conversations, because I think, you know, as harsh as it sounds, we do not actually know our time of death. And that could come at any time, anyway. We do not know. So it's never too early to have a conversation about what your wishes are. Things are changing very rapidly. We're going to have less land for burials, and then we'll also have natural burials coming into play. Natural burials are not as simple as you think, because some people think, oh, great, put me in the coffin and put me in the ground, but it's not as simple as that. So, and every state has different laws about, what we can do. So as far as being preparing for what your choices are in that, so I know this is probably not just an Australia-wide thing, so each country will have their own rules and guidelines. In Australia, every state has its own rules and guidelines. But the first place to start is like having a think about what would your wishes be in like a trauma, in a prolonged illness, or in just simply natural dying, because dying is a very natural thing as well. What sorts of okay, so if you're going to be in a medical setting, what is okay with you? What is not okay? If you have a very poor prognosis, do you want to have your life prolonged with, invasive procedures? Or you might be happy to have your life prolonged by antibiotics, oral, or you might want intravenous. So there's so many things to think about, but where you start is with an advanced healthcare plan. And if you jump online in Australia, you can find that quite easily and print it down, have a read. It is the only legal document before you die around your healthcare. And a lot of people go, well, I've written a will. Well, a will only comes into play after your death. So
you've got to die, yeah.
Yeah, so anything you put in a will has nothing to do with how you're going to be cared for before you actually die. So the advanced healthcare plan is then signed off by a GP, and you can also have an enduring power of attorney and also a medical power of attorney. That could be the same person or two different people. So, and then there's a statement of choices. And on the statement of choices, that is the advanced healthcare plan will always be taken first as the legal document, but a statement of choices, like in Queensland, we have a statement of choices, and it just gives you more scope to write more detail about what you would like, what you would appreciate. So that could be simple things that some people want to die alone, like in the sense that they see it as a spiritual process and they want to listen to certain music and, they're okay to be alone, or they just want short visits. Other people would like someone to be there with them throughout the process. Some people, would want to have conversation going. Other people would just like presence and silence. So you can get very fine and very specific on what you want. But it's also the lead up to that time of that, end of life, to like when you're in a transitional time and then you're actually in that end of life pathway. Also what you want, how much intervention do you want? So you kind of have to run a few scenarios perhaps to think of what might be suitable for you, what, doesn't resonate for you. And also after death, leaving instructions of what you would like. Actually, in that time where the family is really processing a lot, it gives them a lot of support because they have more insight and it doesn't have to be such a challenging time. But families are interesting anyway. So I have sat with people, and this was many, many years ago as a young registered nurse, where they're talking about the rings before the person has died. And I'm like, oh, wow, interesting. And I do believe people die at the moment they're meant to die. Like, we are not in control, but watching a family sit and do that and sit for 2 or 3 days, never leaving the side. And then they decided to go home and have a shower. And the one son that was appointed to remain decided to go down to the chapel. And 5 minutes later, he died. He was not going to die for them or with them. So it's interesting. I've seen a lot of deaths over my years, and watching how they actually unroll. So sometimes people, you know, want family to leave the room before they pass. So yeah, there's a lot of, it doesn't even matter if you don't write it in legal document. You can write it in a book. So you can have like what we call a death box, where you put all the information, or you might want to call it before death box, but you can leave like everything in there that, you know, you want. Some people plan their funerals, and some people will write their own eulogy. Some people will choose the music and they pop it all in just a simple box. It can be anything, or it can be a drawer. Only thing is, you have to tell somebody where it is. It helps.
Yeah, that's right. So, would we be able to get some links to these documents? Like, you know, people in other countries will have something similar, no doubt, within their countries. If we had some links to those official ones in Australia, well, then people would be able to look for something similar in their own countries. I think that would be really, you know, really useful outcome for people to be able to do that. And you know, the key sticking point that I can hear in what you're saying is that you have to have a GP sign it off. So the GP's got to agree to it. So obviously there's going to be some ethical constraints actually in the GP's observation, is there, or not?
No, it's really, when you look at an advanced healthcare plan, like I said, it is very straightforward. So there's not a lot of ethical issues there. But in your statement of choices, you could certainly put more stuff. That is just, I think, witnessed by a Justice of the Peace. And like I said, it will not stand, like the doctors can override it, but if the wishes are clear and deemed reasonable, you know, they will follow to the best of their ability. So,
it'll make a big difference anyway. So, you know, like the difference between being force-fed and, you know, like I'm fed up with eating, so I'm just going to stop eating. Like that's a huge difference for people. That is a massive, massive difference. And, you know, like I don't want to go on to, you know, some kind of incubator or something like that, or I do. That's a, sorry?
Ventilator.
Sorry, I didn't mean incubator. I meant ventilator. Thank you for catching me on that. Yeah. Incubator would be all right.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't want to be on a ventilator. I would not want to.
Yeah, and the advanced healthcare plan is very, like, you know, very clear on that stuff. So a person may be happy to be ventilated because they've been in a motor accident, they've got 2 collapsed lungs, and, you know, that's going to support them for 2 days, and then they will be off the ventilator and healing and return to a normal life over a period of weeks to months. But if you're on that ventilator because you're not going to have any quality of life, you've got brain damage, and that you may choose not to be ventilated, and that the outcome of that may be death. And so that's so in the advanced healthcare planning, that's allowed for. You can put, if I have a reasonable outcome, you know, it's a short-term measure, that's okay. And I mean, in any trauma, probably by the time anyone gets to, you know, your side, that, you know, they'll have instigated that type of care, because that's just how our system works. Paramedics are obligated to, you know, proceed unless there's anything glaring at them. So.
Okay, fair enough.
So you won't get into too much conflict there. It's more as you're preparing for your own end of life in a normal, you know, situation, that you're clear on what you want and what you don't want.
Fair enough. So, Lynette, what's your big shout out to the world? What would you like to see changing?
I would love to just have people so much more aware of how the system works, of, you know, for our elder care. I love the idea of, you know, caring for people in their home. However, I do totally understand that is not suitable or able to be done for a lot of people. So if elder care is the way you're going and you're looking at facility care, do your research, gain as much information, consider, looking to people who are offering end-of-life support and services, because we can make your journey a lot easier. We don't have to tell anyone what to do, but we have a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, a lot of information that can help you to make wise decisions moving forward. So, and do not be afraid to have the conversation with someone about dying, because we're all born and we all die, and it is our one guarantee in life. So I think we need to be open and a lot of people go, well, dying that's such a, that's not a nice conversation. But if you talk about it, it can be so freeing, which enables us to live. And living is what we're doing, and dying is only the last, like death is at the last breath. So until then, you're living. And if you can, be clear, shift some fears, you'll work through some stuff for yourself and your family. And when the time comes, it can be a far, far less. It's hard to use words there because there's always loss. But I guess my wish for people is to have the best death possible. So, if they want to be surrounded by their loved ones, that's amazing. If they want to die alone and that's what they want, that too is truly, they're right.
So in terms of, this is another whole conversation to have with another type of specialist, obviously, but, the two really important moments in your life, most extremely important moments in your life, are your birth and your death, and so, like, what is the experience that you're having at that moment of, coming into the world, and what is that experience that you're having as you leave the world? Very, very, very important moments, and like pivotal moments, obviously. And we don't take anything like enough sort of care in the management of them. I'm quite sure. I know I've had 4 children, and they, the experiences of those children coming into the world is another topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's another whole topic. Anyway, Lynette, have you got anything that you'd like to just share before we finish?
No, I think we've covered a fair bit.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure.